Hey all, Holly Warner here, owner, founder of Holly Warner Health, hopping on to talk about mycotoxins, aka mold, aflatoxins, things that we are exposed to in our daily life that you may or may not be aware of. When we think of mold toxicity, a lot of people think of, living in some place that's damp, or that perhaps there was a flood in your basement and there was mold. This is what we think of when we think of mold exposure or mold toxicity. We don't think about the chocolate that we had as a snack. We don't think about the coffee that we drank this morning. The diagnosis of chronic mold toxicity or chronic inflammatory disease or mast cell disease or mast cell disorder, these are diagnoses that we get. And with any inflammatory disease, we look at what causes the inflammation, but we need to dig a little bit deeper and question as to perhaps there is some sort of a mold toxicity that's present. So what the heck is a mycotoxin? A mycotoxin is a secondary metabolite produced by organisms of the fungal community. Left undiagnosed, this can lead to long-term health issues. It can lead to chronic health conditions. It can even lead to cancer. What I see commonly in my own practice is every spring here in Canada, the snow melts, here comes the snow mold, and then all of a sudden our bucket is too full, it's overflowing, and we react. And that means testing to see what do we have an overabundance of, what's going on, what's our course of action to tackle this mold toxicity. Of course, what are some of the signs and symptoms that might be presenting themselves? Tired. Do you ever notice that when it's the spring and the snow is melting and the snow mold is in the air, or just days of higher mold when you're exposed to certain foods, you feel more tired, lethargic? That's a symptom. Depression, thoughts of suicide, that can be severe mold toxicity, absolutely. Neurological or autoimmune issues, that can be some way for them to present themselves. We don't know the cause of many of the autoimmune conditions that are out there. Swelling of the lower extremities is another one that I've seen due to the pancreatic effect. I'll get to that one. I see a lot of people who have mold toxicity that they're either sad or angry. And sometimes they bounce between and they go, am I bipolar? And we address the mold issue, we test, and then we address what we've seen. And once the mold issue has been addressed, these mood swings, they self-regulate. Did you know that mold toxicity is a huge contributing factor to intestinal permeability? Yep. So food sources, which are really common, can be a huge contributing factor to having leaky gut. Leaky gut is not just a buzzword, it's something that's very common. A large number of the population has this. I think one of the reasons that we see such success with diets like the carnivore diet or a paleo diet or even a ketogenic diet is the removal of grains. Now, when you remove things like corn and rice and other grains, you do remove mycotoxins. And when you remove the mycotoxins, you're gonna see more healing that's gonna happen, healing of the gut, along with certain specific supplementation. Think of like zinc and colostrum. Something else to look at with mold exposure is that you notice if you have elevated liver enzymes, that can typically be indicative of mold exposure. So when I see somebody come in and they have elevated liver enzymes and they go, but I'm doing everything right, this doesn't make sense. Unless you're someone who has a drinking habit, I tend to say, hey, let's do a mycotoxins test. These toxins, when I said leaky gut, it also is a contributor to leaky brain. It affects our brain. We get brain fog. It's hard to put our words together. Do you ever find that you're trying to put a sentence together and your words just don't jive, they won't flow? That can be a symptom of a mold burden. Confusion. I've seen confusion. They did a study where I believe it was 30% or 1 in 3 of the patients with Alzheimer's or who had presented with Alzheimer's symptoms actually had mold toxicity. So that was pretty cool. These mycotoxins, they are small. They're secreted by the liver, elevated liver enzymes. Is that there are studies out there that had shown development in children in other countries. It wasn't Canadian, it wasn't USA, but other countries where they hadn't been exposed to mycotoxins, whether it be through the corn or through the rice. And it showed that it created leaky gut. It then created malabsorption. It created malabsorption of nutrients, but it also created issues with protein. So it was the protein synthesis. Since it inhibits protein synthesis, that meant that these kids were presenting with all of these different developmental symptoms or delays due to protein insufficiencies. And then we go a step further and we look at adults that have the swelling of the lower leg. I mentioned that earlier. Edema. You look at edema. We look at the swelling of the lower extremities. We look at the edema, and then we do a mold test, and more often than not, we find that there's mold toxicity present. So this edema happened to be because of lack of protein and inability to synthesize protein. Mold toxicity inhibits protein synthesis. Edema, protein, contributing factor, lack thereof. So those of you out there with edema, I'm hoping that sort of sunk in a little bit and you go, oh my God, I have edema, or my mom's got edema, or my dad's got edema. Hey, they should do a mycotoxin test. And then you get on the internet and you send me a message. I'm hoping all sorts of light bulbs are going to go off with this video. Remember, mold makes everything permeable. It makes your gut permeable. It makes your brain permeable. It makes our gut, our cells, our mitochondria, our brain, all of it permeable. I don't know about you, but I don't want to have a permeable brain. There have been rat studies that have showed that low levels of MSH in rat models, and I know I hate to use rat models as a reference point, but it correlated with the induction of Crohn's and colitis. And then you go, well, hang on a second, maybe mold was my trigger for developing Crohn's or colitis. I'm not saying it's the only trigger, but it's a big friggin' one, that's for sure. Okay, so let's take a peek a little bit here on pancreatic insufficiency. I've seen patients who have high levels of mold or mold toxicity who have come back with this pancreatic insufficiency. And we've noticed this because we've run a stool test. And in the stool test, one of the things that came up was this pancreatic elastase was at low levels. So I'm not saying you have to go and get a stool test to see this. You can skip that step. They're quite expensive, quite relatively speaking. I would just go right ahead and test your mold, your mycotoxins, and see what's up. Mold causes this low pancreatic enzymes. So if your pancreatic enzymes are low caused by mold, I mean, as we deal with the mold, we're just gonna boost up your pancreatic enzymes. It really is just that simple. You know, I mentioned vitamin D, vitamin A, zinc as supplements, probiotics. Humic and fulvic acid are huge. I love using Shilajit for that. I have specific brands of Shilajit that I use for the fulvic and humic acid. They're fantastic. They're also great to boost testosterone. And as far as probiotics go, the spore-based ones tend to be really good for treating entropathy. However, I also like the lactobacillus. I like the bifidobacter. Those are two that I also enjoy using with carnivore. You re-inoculate, you do your 30 days, and then you're sort of done, and hopefully your body has kind of caught up and is doing its own thing now. Okay, so let's talk about the testing that's out there. We have different testing that's out there, and each of them comes with their strong suits and their weaknesses. We have issues detecting these mycotoxins in the urine. There's multiple issues that we have. We have the current testing, which is the ELISA method, which was really, really good. It was the gold standard. And then this mass spectrometry that came along, and then that was kind of the gold standard. But neither one of them is really able to scale adequately. One is going to be cost prohibitive because you would think that the more you test, the cheaper it would get. Whereas with some of these tests, the more you test, the more cost prohibitive it becomes. Some mycotoxins, they look alike and they can't differentiate between them, and it helps to be able to do so. Then we look at the mass spectrometry testing. Okay, so that's the next kind of gold standard that sort of came along. It was supposedly better and more efficient than the ELISA testing. It's definitely more sensitive than the ELISA testing. So that's good because we want more sensitivity. It is able to differentiate between the different mycotoxins. So again, that's good as well. One's too expensive and you know, one's cheaper and you're not getting bang for your buck. One's more expensive, can do more, it's more sensitive, but it's still not enough. We were kind of sitting in this gray area of, I'm still not getting enough details from the testing. Okay, so let's talk about the new testing that I'm bringing in. This is a phenomenal test. It is a 3D, it is immunochip, competitive ELISA. It is the most accurate test out there. The more you test, it doesn't matter if you test 1 or 31, it's the same price. It's not cost prohibitive. And comparatively speaking, from the price point, it compares to the other tests that are out there. So it's a better test, but at the same price. Pretty close. It has a higher concentration of the mycotoxins that it's able to pull from the urine. It's got the antibodies as well. So antibodies bind to toxins, so you'll see the antibodies tested in the urine as well as the toxins, which is fantastic. It's so cool. When competitive antibodies are added, there's gonna be this high concentration of toxins that's gonna be visible, which is what we want. We wanna have a more accurate read, and this is part of how it's able to give us a more accurate read. This test is the most comprehensive and the most relevant test on the market today. So $299 US. You can get bundles. So there are bundles that are available to you. So if you look at some of the stuff that's on my website and you say, you know, I wanna do, say, the gut zoomer and the mycotoxins, or I wanna do the mycotoxins and a few other things, we can look at, okay, are there bundles with the mycotoxins? This is why I say to people that before you go and purchase a test, any of the diagnostics that are listed on my website are there for educational purposes, for you to look at them and dissect them and say, oh, this sounds like something I want, but you cannot purchase them. You have to click in so that it prompts a call with me so that we can talk and say, what is it you're looking at doing? Perhaps I can save you some money. So there are ways to save you guys money if we know long-term what your goal is and things you're interested in testing. And I am happy to take the time to have that conversation with you so you don't order the wrong test and you do save money. And then at the end of the day, if all you want is the mycotoxins, then that's what we do. All right, guys. Hopefully we can have a conversation. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Shoot me a DM, email my team. We are happy to answer any questions that you might have. Shoot us your questions. We will get back to you as soon as we can. Hope you enjoy your day. Talk to you later.